like to go over a few key guidelines for our virtual meeting. I'm reminding all participants that this is a virtual meeting and certain specific guidelines would apply, including making sure that everyone's microphone is muted when you are not speaking to help keep background noise at a minimum. Adjust cameras, which I see everyone has, so that your face is clearly visible. To ensure that notifications from your cell phone or any other electronic devices in your vicinity are muted during the course of the meeting. Members of the listening and viewing audience are also invited to post or send their comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms, Facebook page, ParlView, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and Twitter. I would like to start our introductions. Today with us, we have the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of representatives from the Ministry of Education, representatives from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, the representatives from the Living Water Community, and the chair of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. I would like, in that order, for those I call out, starting with the Ministry of National Security, to introduce themselves, and then I would invite members of our committee to do the same thereafter. Ministry of National Security.
Good morning and thank you. I am Nataki Atiba-Dilchan, Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of National Security, and with my team today, I have Ms. Vera Prasad, who's the Acting Chief Immigration Officer, Dr. Samantha Chedram, who's our Director of Counter Trafficking Unit. She has with her on her left her Deputy Director, Mrs. Kimoy Thomas Williams. And we also have another addition that wasn't previously mentioned to the committee, Ms. Laura Ramcharitar. She's our Immigration Officer 4 at the Enforcement Unit of the Immigration Division.
Thank you, Ministry, Ms. Nataki. We move on to the Ministry of Labor.
Good morning, Chair and colleagues. I am Nati Willis, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labor. To my left, I have Ms. Sabina Gomez, Chief Labor Relations Officer. To my furthest left, I have Mr. Bruce Spencer, who is the head of the Labor Market Information Unit. And to my right is Mr. Farouk Mohammed, who is the Chief Labor Inspector Specialist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministry of Labor. I would like to move on to officials from the Ministry of Education. Leading off there would be Ms. Anna Singh. Ministry of Education, your microphone is on mute. Okay, while the Ministry of Labor seems to be getting their audio in order, I would like to move on to the officials from Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. I believe Mr. Kurt Simon is the lead this morning there.
Yes, good morning, Chair. I'm Acting DCP Simon, Crime and Intelligence in the TTPS. On my right is DCP Chandul. There's also Senior Superintendent Ramkilawan. You also have here Superintendent Gayalin and Sergeant Mills. We'll be representing the TTPS now.
Many thanks. We go back to the Ministry of Education, who I believe has sorted out the issues.
Good morning again. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair and other members of other ministries and organizations. I am Anna Singh, Acting Chief Education Officer. With me is Mr. Aaron Ramratan. He is the Director of School Supervision. Mrs. Henry David, she's the Director of Educational Planning Division. And Ms. Ingrid Kemchan, who is a Curriculum Coordinator, Modern Languages. We're happy to be here. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ms. Singh. We move on now to the officials of the Archdiocese of Port of Spain. Leading us off would be Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon, and with me here is Ms. Sharon Mango, who is the CEO of the Catholic Education Board of Management. Unfortunately, Darian Narayan did not receive a link, which I think Sharon has just sent to him. So he might join us in a short while.
Very well. We move on to the officials of the Living Water community now.
Good morning, Chair, members, and all of the representatives. My name is Simone Aguilera-Hay. I am the Education Manager at the Ministry for Migrants and Refugees at Living Water Community. And with me, I have Ms. Svetlana Liansky, who's a protection advocate with our case management team. Good morning.
Good morning and thank you. And lastly, we move on to the representative from the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, Ms. Pitcher.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Denise Pitcher, and I am the Executive Director for the Caribbean Center for Human Rights.
Great. I would like to advise that the public inquiry, the objective is as follows. Just to remind everyone here, it is to examine the extent to which the recommendations of the committee regarding the treatment of migrants with specific focus on the rights to education, employment, and protection from sexual exploitation were implemented. At this point in time, I would like to have a brief opening remarks from all stakeholders present here today before we get into our crux of the entire meeting. I start with Ms. Nataki Dilchan from Ministry of National Security.
Thank you again, Chair. The M&S team welcomes this opportunity to be part of this discourse on the treatment of migrants and to be allowed to elucidate, where necessary, on the written submissions that we will have made to the committee and to speak further on the actions the ministry is taking to continue in the area of protection of our migrant population from exploitation. Thank you.
Ms. Williams from Ministry of Labour.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. The Ministry of Labour is grateful for the opportunity to participate in this follow-up inquiry into the treatment of migrants. The work of the ministry is inherently connected to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 8, which speaks to promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. The ministry plays a pivotal role in fulfilling Trinidad and Tobago's obligation, particularly to target 8.8, which is to protect labor rights and promote safe and secure working environments for all workers, including migrant workers, in particular women migrants, and those in precarious employment. As a champion for the promotion of decent work to all workers, inclusive of migrant workers, the ministry recognizes the importance of a strategic and collaborative approach to addressing the reality of today's working environment, especially those faced by migrant workers. In this regard, our commitment towards addressing the concerns of migrant workers is evidenced in the development of a draft labor migration policy for Trinidad and Tobago, which is currently before Cabinet, and the adoption of the National Workplace Policy on Sexual Harassment in 2019, which also speaks specifically to migrant workers. Bearing in mind that our labor laws apply to national migrants alike, the Ministry of Labour continues to safeguard the rights of all workers, inclusive of migrant workers, by ensuring compliance with the fundamental principles and rights at work and other terms and conditions of employment. The ministry assures the commitment to treating migrant workers and stands ready to assist this committee in its deliberation and to provide any additional information or clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. We now move on to Ms. Anna Singh from the Ministry of Education.
Chair, on this matter of the treatment of migrants with specific focus on their rights to education, The Ministry of Education in its submission has informed this honorable committee of the current provisions at its schools. Migrants from 33 nations are catered for in the statistics that we submitted. Most students, migrant students registered are from CARICOM. They are accommodated at schools in all educational districts and attend both denominational as well as government schools. Arrangements are therefore well established for children of migrants to register at a government or assisted school. These arrangements are detailed in the submission. Are there challenges for equity in access? Yes, we have identified such, and I will just list. Eligibility is premised on meeting the requirements of the immigration laws, the Act, the regulations, and guidance in the manuals. These laws inform the requirement to register at a school. The availability of space at schools must not displace a national, and priorities are given to the community the school is located at. Transient family, housing, and work arrangements. And finally, to negotiate the national curriculum, students must be conversant with English, as this is the language of instruction and also communication amongst the school community. Collaborations to facilitate technical advice to institutions that are providing instruction have been facilitated. Thus, in participating in today's meetings, the Ministry of Education stands ready to clarify and expand on its submission, but is mainly eager to pivot on the opportunities presented through the collective efforts of all assembled in assuring that while each institution or organization has its specific remit, we are able to align and optimize all resources towards a seamless, agile, and rational system that is responsive to the needs of children, especially those who are vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Singh. I now ask the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Intelligence and Investigation, Mr. Kurt Simon, to give his introduction.
Thank you again, Chair. The Tobago Police Service, we continue to understand our role as the lead law enforcement agency in Tobago and the migrant issue as it relates to the topic here, where we focus on sexual exploitations. It falls directly into the remit of the TTPS as it relates to investigations and prevention of crimes, and we are quite aware of the various typologies of crime that migrant populations may be exposed to. Hence, we work closely with our affiliates, that is within law enforcement, but we also work closely with the various ministries and even the NGOs to bring some sort of semblance of order to an issue that seems to be rising in this country, and we are prepared using our various technologies, our various pillars that we stem from to have an understanding of the situation and to keep it under a level of control. So we are here perhaps at the beckon of our society, of our nation, continuing to work assiduously in keeping Trinidad and Tobago a safe and secure place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simon. I would now like to ask for a brief introduction from the Archbishop, Charles Jason Warden.
I would ask Ms. Mangro to do the introduction.
Good morning, all. The Catholic Education Board of Management, the Archdiocese of Port of Spain, we are very grateful for the opportunity to discuss this matter, particularly as we look at the education of our migrant children and the treatment of migrants. We work with our children in our schools as well as through our parishes. We have not been successful so far in providing education for one part of the migrant population, while we have a history of receiving children, migrant children, into our schools. Unfortunately, there is a segment of the migrant population now that has not been able to gain access into our schools. Meanwhile, while we await approvals for them to do so, we have been very busy working with other agencies, collaborating very closely with them to prepare our schools for the day that they will be allowed legally into the schools. To this end, we have been part of a group that has developed a phased approach to the integration of migrant children into our schools in a way that meets all of the local and legal requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now ask the education management community. I believe it's Simone Aguilera A. From Living Waters community, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning again. We at Living Water Community are extremely honored, I think, to be considered to be part of this effort. Our Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, some of you may be aware, we work mostly to enhance the protection of migrants and promote their integration into the host community. We work to identify, prevent, respond to abuse and exploitation, including gender-based violence, and risk the children, including those who have come to our shores unaccompanied. We try our best to enhance their access to rights and to mitigate risk for all, the migrant and refugee population that we serve. So we are very committed to this process, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and provide any further clarification needed on our submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, we would like to get opening remarks, from Ms. Denise Pitcher, the Caribbean Center for Human Rights.
Thank you, Chairman and other committee members. And thank you for this opportunity for allowing CCHR to raise our concerns with regards to immigration detention in general in Trinidad and Tobago, but also specifically on the operations in the heliport, which we have serious concerns about, especially in light of ongoing reports of alleged sexual abuse of female detainees in the heliport, and also to raise concerns about the legality of the operation of the heliport, given that it was a COVID response mechanism, and now that the pandemic is over, and infringement of other rights in the Constitution. And we also welcome the opportunity to provide recommendations to increase the rights of migrants and refugees and protect them from sexual exploitation and abuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pitcher. I would like to remind, before we go that way, I have to lead off in the introduction of the committee. Good morning. I'm Dr. Ibrahim, the chairman of this committee. I ask other members to introduce themselves.
Hazel Thompson, Ahi, member.
Jillian John, member.
Good morning all, Anita Haynes, member.
Good morning all, Keith Scotland, member.
Great. I would just like to remind committee members and all officials present to please direct your questions through the chair and to activate the microphone when you are speaking and take it off soon thereafter. We will now proceed as agreed by the committee. Member Scotland, I know you mentioned that you would like to lead on the first question. Please go ahead.
Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, thank you. Chairman, as I was refreshing my recollection with the issues paper, something came to mind, and if you don't mind, I would like to start with the Archbishop of Port of Spain. Archbishop, the abuse or the exploitation of anyone in itself is something that is frowned upon. But when it relates to migrants and particularly children and people that are vulnerable, my respectful view, I see it as having just not a physical aspect, but there's another aspect that to my humble mind and to my simple mind is almost, it borders on unnatural because it's inhumane. So it's not natural to the human. What is does the church see it that way? And what is being done to address victims in that regard? I have a word I want to use, but I want to be a little cautious. So I will use the word inhuman or inhumane, and I will not use the word demonic, but it borders on that. Archbishop, do you agree? And what is being done to, if anything is being done to address that?
Thank you very much, sir. The question is a very important one. The biblical mandate is that we must always protect the migrant, the widow, and the vulnerable in our midst. And when a society, a person, or we as a people allow for the exploitation of the migrant, the widow, the most vulnerable, we are displaying the worst of ourselves as humans. And many times, you know, people are preyed upon because they can be preyed upon. But what that actually betrays is a poverty of even our human dignity, that we would prey upon people because we can. And so to your point, it is every abuse of everyone is a violation that is significant. And I mean, we've been living through that in the world today. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have not done enough for the protection, for the advocacy, for the care of our migrants who are here in our country with us, and especially protecting them from abuse, especially when they are in the care of the official parts of Trinidad and Tobago. And I see this as a very grave matter, one that we should all be very concerned about. And to the play on words that you are playing with, I would say that this is evil. All abuse is evil.
Thank you, Archbishop. The government and I don't want to politicize this, but the government has put structures in place, for example, for our neighbors so that they can regularize themselves. I mean, and that was a bold move, a risky move. Could you, and I wouldn't want to put you on the spot now, and I will ask Chairman through you that all, and this is directed, Chair, to all the entities who are appearing before us. Could you put in writing for us what you think, what more can be done in order to protect migrants who are now, for whatever reason, now have to flock to Trinidad and Tobago? I would, if we can get that in writing, Chair, through you, we can, when we meet in plenary, we can distill it and cull it in a way that is understandable when we submit our reports. Can I ask you to do that, Archbishop? And the Chair will give the time frame because it's the Chair's remit. And
yes.
All
agreed, member. I would like to have, the committee would like to have those submissions within a calendar week, written from all. It's not just from Archdiocese, but from all interest groups present here today for that particular question. Go ahead, member.
Thank you. I would now, Chair, through you, and thank you very much, Archbishop. May I turn to the Ministry of Education? Ministry of Education, in reviewing your submission, you highlighted the following challenges to the Ministry of Education: the non-availability of spaces in public school, the non-submission of the relevant documents, and the emergence of unregulated institutions, individuals, and subsequent provision of services. Could you tell us what has the Ministry of Education done to or put in place to overcome the challenges of processing the applications of migrant children?
Ministry of Education. Member Scotland has asked the question.
Yes.
They have.
Yes. Applications to register at a school. The Ministry of Education has provided an opportunity to do so at every district, but has also provided opportunity to do so at its head office. Applications can be submitted now online. Applications can be submitted at the school site and at the district offices. So there are multiple opportunities to apply to be registered at a school.
Chairman, just as a follow-up, is there something that you have that can educate the public so that they can access these facilities, Ministry of Education?
Yes, so as indicated, our website and then all our social media platform provides the information that allows for registration. Also, the ability to register or the opportunity to register is something that is well entrenched in terms of the training of staff at schools and at the district level. So anyone can come in at those venues closest to their location, and as well as I've indicated through our social media platform and our website, we have provided the information. It's also available if you call into our Ministry of Education. We have personnel who will provide the details and support. Thank you.
Chairman, I go ahead, Chair. Sorry,
yes,
Chair.
Thank you, Member Scotland. Ministry of Education, you're speaking on some very broad terms there. And we're talking here about migrant children, children without readily available access to information, and also readily available probably in language that they can understand as well. Can you just go through the processes? I mean, instead of just saying it's on a website, how is the outreach process tailored towards migrants? The powers that be who hold or who are responsible for the recording of the presence of migrants in our society, are they the ones who will be liaising with the Ministry of Education? Can you enlighten us a little bit into this process, because I don't believe it is satisfactory to state that it's on a website. How does the process go?
Through the Chair, in addition to the information I've provided and the range of opportunities, I will defer to our Director of School Supervision, who will furnish you with additional information. Thank you.
Right. Good morning, everyone. With regards to specifically to the migrants, are you all hearing me? Yeah, good. As was mentioned earlier, all our doors are open with regards to schools and district offices. So migrants are free to interact with the principals and also the district office. They can bring someone with them if there is a language barrier. so that communication with regards to the information can be communicated and they would be able to understand exactly what it is required. Where a situation is school can say a space is available, then the principal would provide to the parent of that particular non-national a list of things that would be required in terms of documentation for submitting. Of course, that will be based on if it's a primary school, you're looking at which standard level, class level for the student to be accepted, or at the secondary level, you're looking at the form level. So basic information in terms of the national identification of the particular parent who's doing the application, right, the national ID or passport, copies of documents of biodata of the passport, visa page, birth certificate, previous student permit if granted, school records of student, immunization records, other documents. These things would be put together and would be sent to the district office from the principal of that particular school. From there, it will be checked by the school supervisor of the district and sent to the Ministry of Education head office. Then it will come to the director of school supervision. From the director of school supervision, that information is sent to the Ministry of National Security for the chief immigration officer to look at and of course to respond to the decision for approving. And that would more or less be the process where admission of a non-national or these migrants into our public schools, primary or secondary.
Thank you, Mr. Ramratan. I would like to recognize Member Haynes, who I believe wants to ask a follow-up to this.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning again, and thank you to all of you who made the time to meet with our committee, and certainly we hope to make significant progress in our discussion today. To the Ministry of Education and indeed to our entire committee and the panel gathered here today, we have, when we look at the issue of migrants, and I know the ministry has explained the process that there are some 33 countries represented within the migrant population that has access to these schools, etc. But looking at Trinidad and Tobago society today, when we are discussing the barriers to entry, I think we really need not skirt around the issue that we may specifically be trying to address, in that there are a group of migrants, a group of persons who have come to Trinidad without the luxury of being able to pack up all of their paperwork, your immunization card, etc., your school leaving certificate. They are in fact children. They have come to Trinidad and Tobago. Member Scotland would have indicated that in 2019, the government created a space for them to regularize their status. Some persons may have utilized the opportunities for circumstances that we may not be able to distill today. Others may not have been able to do so. So we can be really clear on recognizing that there's an issue by a significant population who would not be able to access the student permit that we are saying is a solution to our problem. In recognizing that issue, in looking at the submission from the Ministry of Education, I know that has been understood by itemizing English not being the spoken language, the first language of some persons, but also from the submission of the Port of Spain Archdiocese, who, and I'd like to quote from their submission here, they said, through the provision of physical resources and training for teachers at 20 Roman Catholic primary schools have been specifically prepared to receive Venezuelan migrant children once approval is given to do so. And so to me, from those submissions, I think we can all recognize that with specific reference here to the Venezuelan migrant children, that there is a barrier, that the Port of Spain Archdiocese would have identified a space to perhaps create a space to alleviate the situation in some space, and they're awaiting approvals. So my first question is, what is this approval process that they may be waiting on? And my second question, but related question, is acknowledging the registration process that took place in 2019, acknowledging that there are Venezuelan migrants in Trinidad and Tobago who may be registered, may be unregistered, but acknowledging the realities of our society in 2023, what systems are the ministry putting in place to create a space for equitable access to education for the children who are residents in Trinidad and Tobago at this time?
Ministry of Education.
Through Chair, so as I've indicated in our opening remarks and continue, I am recognizing what you have said. We are unable at this time to suggest a system that is not in line with the immigration laws. In other words, the requirements of the Ministry of Education to register is aligned with those laws. There are no alternatives at this time.
Agreed. And thank you very much, Ministry of Education. And I understand that. Luckily for us, we do have persons in the immigration space. Now, mind you, I am not going to be unfair here. I understand that you are unable to speak to policy matters because you're in the space as a technocrat. You enact policy that comes your way and you find a way to do it. So my question here is specific. Is the thinking going forward now? Are we at the space of immigration, at the space of labor? I understand, well, education has already answered, but in these spaces, are we discussing ways in which we are truly looking at an inclusion or an inclusive space towards national development with an honest recognition of the situation that we're facing right now in 2023? And so Ministry of Education, I absolutely accept your answer, and I understood where you come from because you are part of a process. We have other members who are part of that process, and hopefully somebody can answer as to where we are along that train in terms of from 2019, all of the actualities of the pandemic, etc., given due consideration. However, from 2019 with the initial registration, where are we now going forward with creating a space? Because I think that this conversation takes two spaces. There's the treatment of migrants, as Member Scotland would have stated, where the mistreatment, the exploitation, etc., which is a critical issue, and I'm sure we'll continue to address as a committee. But there is also the treatment of migrants with the creation of an othering within our society, where you can become part without truly becoming part, because there's no true movement towards inclusion. So you get a registration permit here, but what can you truly access? And that is also an important discussion, because we can look at one extreme of extreme mistreatment and exploitation, etc. But there's also an equally more subtle and very, very dangerous space of not truly being included in part of national development. So I don't know if we could turn through you, Chair. I know you have our business arranged, but if someone from the Ministry of National Security, Immigration, somebody can give us some answers in terms of what does this approach look like holistically, from the process of being registered and recognized as a migrant in Trinidad, and then how do you move through the system, through labor, etc.
Thanks for the very wide question, Member Scotland, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chairman. Chairman, the contribution made by Member Haynes may actually dovetail with the question that I may want to direct now to the Ministry of Labour. And maybe, Chairman, they can, subject of course to your discourse and your take on it, put that answer in writing, because it's going to be quite a long discourse. But maybe, Chairman, they can answer this in short thrift and then get back to us on the main question. So if you allow me to ask it, we can roll this up into one so that I can move on. Thank you, Chair. To the Ministry of Labour, you indicated in your submission to the committee that the draft migration policy for Trinidad and Tobago was submitted to Cabinet for its consideration in November 2022, and the Cabinet subsequently informed the ministry that the note was referred to the Finance and General Purposes Committee for consideration. As you come before us now in May, knowing that this is receiving the attention of the FNGPC, was any timeline given for the consideration of the note by F and GP and subsequent approval by the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago?
Through you, Chair, yes, we would have looked at timeframes, but subsequent to Cabinet's approval, we intend to go out to stakeholders again in terms of what this policy looks like. We would have consulted with a number of stakeholders, all our tripartite partners, including academia and international organizations. So the policy would have received inputs from these stakeholders, and the policy, broadly speaking, without going into too much detail, looks at, and in response to Member Haynes, looks at how do we optimize the benefits of migrants in national development. Look at how do you ensure social protection of the migrants, and then the other goal is how do you put in place a governance structure or framework to ensure managed migration process.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is my penultimate question. And if you would, when everybody has had the chance, allow me to come back. To the Ministry of National Security, I am focused on the idea of human trafficking. But Ministry of Labor, can you then confirm to the country, though, that the migrant policy is receiving the attention of the government of Trinidad and Tobago? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because it was submitted to Cabinet and we were informed that, and I know that deliberations will take place at the FNGPC of Cabinet.
Thank you. To the Ministry of National Security, we noted in your submission the phenomena of fast tracking of human trafficking cases before the courts to ensure that perpetrators and victims receive justice in a quick sense. But there's also the concept that justice denied or justice delayed is justice denied. Could you tell us what process is being put in place by the prosecution in order to fast track these cases in light of the competing rights that exist before the courts in Trinidad and Tobago?
National Security?
Yeah, Chairman, with your agreement, I would ask the Deputy Director of the CTU to handle this question, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We have a number of activities in place to treat with it, but just to give you a general understanding of what takes place, as you know, human trafficking matters take a very long time before it even reaches before the magistrate's court. We're talking about 2 to 3 years. And the problem that we have, as you know, in the country is that we have no convictions to date. And the reason for that is because of the length of time that it takes a lot of the victims, because of the trauma they would have undergone. Sometimes they would have moved on with their lives, they would have gotten married, they would have had children, so they don't want to revisit it. Sometimes, unfortunately, they fall back into the practice of prostitution. But because of that, we've had a number of preliminary inquiries, but now police officers will be able to lay charges indictably directly to the High Court. So once that gets off the ground, we are very hopeful that the matters will be much faster dealt with. But on the other side, what the counter-trafficking unit is also doing is also amping up the type of care that is being meted out to victims, because throughout the world, to get a conviction is very difficult. And what we have been doing is ensuring that the victim is ready as well to give evidence. So we are exposing them to counseling, we are exposing them to courses to help them as well to become more empowered. And we are also working, which was also one of the recommendations in the last TIP report, to amp up the amount of cooperation that we do with other entities. And we are working closely with state agencies, NGOs, etc., to get that support for victims. So those are some of the things that we have in place to help the cases to go forward faster.
Chairman, through you, and this is a follow-up question. Member Thompson, I will remember the famous case of Hines versus the Queen. I think that is 1975, One All England reports at page 275, where there was a special gun court created in Jamaica because of the scourge of guns, but the Privy Council shut it down because they say that it infringed the concept of the separation of powers. Chair, through you, may I suggest that seeing that the opportunity was laid out by the Honorable, that by none other than the Honorable Chief Justice of Trinidad, the Honorable Chief Justice, through all relevant protocols, to have these special courts set up that deals specifically with human trafficking. Why has that not been done?
Ministry of National Security.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if the question was directed to us. Thank you, Chair. Well, to answer your question, Member Scotland, there have been ongoing talks, I know that for sure, between the Honourable Minister Hines as well as the Chief Justice on how to treat with this situation. And also, if we establish a special human trafficking court, as you're suggesting, which I fully support as well, the prosecution also needs specific training as well as the judiciary, and the international organizations that we work with, they are actually in the process of creating a training plan so that the attorneys as well as the judges would be prepared with the court. But I can't speak to when a court will be established, of course.
No, but Chairman, I see Member Thompson wants to.
Before that, I must recognize Ms. John's hand was up during the answer. Ms. John?
Yes, yes.
Member John?
Yes, thank you so much, Chairman, for recognizing me and hoping I had a little problem getting on. I want to thank the various members who have come here, the various agencies, Chairman. And through you, I want to note that the Honorable Archbishop had, in his own opening statement, had said that what is happening to the migrant population is wrong in the eyes of the law, but not only based on the law, but also our treatment of them in the eyes of God. And we must be reminded that our Constitution does not only recognize that we are a land of guided by the rule of law, but also by moral and spiritual values. And I think based on all the reports that I've read, we really have to hang our head in shame with respect to how these migrants are being treated. I note one of the contributors spoke about what is happening at the heliport. I want to know if there is nothing that we can do. It's so obvious, it is there. We don't have to wait for new laws or new policies, etc. If there is sexual abuse, the victims are there, perpetrators should be easily identifiable because it's only, I think the access to these places are very limited. So I don't understand why they are not brought swiftly to justice. You know, they are not locked up because really and truly, I think that we are very tardy in terms of treating with these issues. The other one, in reading the submission from the Living Waters, you know, they spoke about the common issues, which we are all aware of in terms of unfair wages. This is in contravention of the Minimum Wages Act. The people are breaching our laws. Our own citizens are breaching our laws openly on non-payment of overtime, forced prostitution and forced labor. And many times you read about little children, you know, being involved in this, teenagers being bought and sold in Trinidad openly, you know, and I think we can do a lot better. I mean, I listened to the Ministry of Education and their whole Gantt chart about this, that, or going to that, into the other. Why can't we have a special route that doesn't flout the law? I mean, the government is the government. It takes a cabinet note or a quick passage within the parliament, which could give access to these children. Think about the consequences now and in the future of not having these migrant children going to school? So, Chairman, you know,
Thank you, Member John. I will. It's a multi-pronged question, and we also have some unanswered questions floating around this morning, which came from Ms. Haynes, as Member Haynes, as well, to members, to the interest groups here. Let's try to come back to where we're at. The Archbishop was referred to in the question from Ms. John. I would like for him to have first pick a response, then I would like to have a response for the Ministry of Labor as it applies to the items that Ms. John has identified, as it applies to the Minimum Wage Act, and then I would like to have an answer from immigration as to the last question. Okay, so Your Worship, please proceed.
Chair, the area I would like to respond to is about education of the migrant children. So that's not in the flow right now. You can come back to me when you want to pick that one back up.
I believe Member Scotland did raise that up. So can you please go ahead one time, and when you finish, if you could just drop your hand on the on the screen one time after. Yeah.
We have been, so 4 years ago, the Prime Minister said that the Catholic Church would take responsibility for the education of the migrant children. And we understood that would be the children who were registered in that process. Out of the 16,000 who were registered, whatever children were legally registered in Trinidad, that we would be able to go ahead and do and educate these children. Now, the education of a child is not an option for a nation, especially if that child is registered in the country. It is a human right. It is the most fundamental human right. But it's also one of the most important things for national security, because if this child grows up in the country and is uneducated, we're going to have trouble down the road. Now, Ms. Mangrove can give the details, but we have done everything possible to get those children into schools. We have worked with all the denominational boards, and we have more than enough places for the registered children of the country to be enrolled into our schools. We have been preparing the teachers for those children to come into our schools. The Minister of National Security and the Minister of Education, the two former ministers, met about 3 years ago to work out how this would happen. And the current minister also knows, and a list was submitted to him again when he became the minister, of the children that we know who are here, who are registered. And I was intrigued to hear both the Ministry of Education and others talk about the easy process, because I would love to have a way to do this. We have the schools, places available that will not displace any national child from education. We have the teachers prepared and the principals prepared. What we can't get is a mechanism to get these children into our schools to be able to be educated.
Many thanks, Archbishop. That leads us into another question to the Ministry of Education. However, I would like the Ministry of Labor to answer the questions as stated by Member John a little while ago. Thank you, Archbishop.
It's also the Ministry of is also immigration, not just education. It's education, immigration have to work together on this.
Yes, noted, Archbishop. Ministry of Labor, can you answer the questions as they apply to wages? And then we will be moving on to the contribution from Member IE.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I've asked my Chief Labor Inspector Specialist, Mr. Farouk Mohammed, to address those concerns.
Good morning, everyone. Basically, the Labor Inspectorate Unit of the Ministry of Labor has responsibility for monitoring 3 key pieces of labor legislation. One of them is the Minimum Wages Act and the orders. Now, these pieces of legislation, they apply to all workers in Trinidad and Tobago, including migrant workers. And when we say migrant workers, it includes those with a regular status as well as those with irregular status. So basically, migrant workers can access our services in terms of understanding their terms and conditions of service. They can make complaints. We also provide information through our social media pages, our website, with messages in Spanish and English to provide information on that. Some of the challenges we have with respect to complaints received, with respect to overtime, is that on some occasions, the migrant worker may not have sufficient information about their employer for labor inspectors to follow up and investigate. They may have limited information of the location of the employer, where their office is, or they may not have a full name of the employer or the name of the establishment. And sometimes this poses a challenge in reaching those employers in order to investigate and correct those breaches. But we're hoping to work with the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, and other stakeholder agencies throughout the country in order to be able to reach directly to the migrant worker population so we can provide advice to them in terms of their rights, as well as to alert them on some of the challenges that we are having on our end, so they then can seek to have those addressed when they're seeking employment.
Thank you. And I think Ms. Gomez, the Chief Labor Relations Officer, may want to add further to that, because I know we go out to the communities, migrant communities, to share on in terms of their rights as employees. So, Ms. Gomez?
Right, Chair and colleagues, now the Ministry of Labor has been committed to addressing the needs of the migrant community. And we have been doing this since 2011. We have been liaising with the Living Water community at the initial stage. Ms. Mingo was involved, and we, I think she used to, we had a specified time where we would go to the community. I think it was a Thursday on lunchtime to really speak to the migrant workers, because sometimes they would not want to come into the Ministry of Labor. So it's a lot of work that we have to do in terms of reaching the community, reaching them at the community level. So we have been working with the Living Water community. We have been working with NGOs. We have been, and Bishop Gordon could attest to that. We did outreach with the Catholic Commission and the parishes that was in the Chaguanas area. So we have been doing a lot, but we cannot do it alone. So we need the help of the NGOs and to meet them at the community level, where we can share information for them to come in. Now, the ministry at the Conciliation Division, we have a helpline, which is 800 CAAD. Now, that is specifically to treat with sexual harassment and sexual exploitation. Now, it's trilingual. We have it in French, and we also have it in Spanish and English. So there is, and for employers can come in if they have a situation that they need advice in terms of how to handle the matter properly. We have it for the migrant workers. We have it for our local workers who can call in. So we try as much as possible to assist and reach the migrant community wherever possible, because our view is that migrant rights are human rights and labor rights are human rights. So we look at it from that perspective, and we try as much as possible with our outreach. We have brochures, as Mr. Mohammed would have said, printed in both Spanish and English. And all our media outlook is geared towards addressing everyone in the community. Because once an employer would have hired you, you are a worker and you have rights and you have entitlement to seek redress even up to the industrial court. And workers, and we're trying to encourage them to come forward, because we have a helpline, but it has not been fully effected or in use, because maybe we have not been able to go out as fast as possible and reach the community to actually, because we may have an idea of what is taking place, but if we don't get them to come and use these services, then it's a lot of work for us to do, and we are willing and committed to do that work.
Thank you from the Ministry of Labour, representatives. Before I move on to Member I's question, I would like to ask a question to immigration and education combined, and it applies to the last question on the point raised by the Archbishop. What we've seen from his submissions, being asked to deliver as respect and preparing for migrant children across the nation, we've seen the levels of preparation that their schools have prepared for the purpose of educating migrant children. There seems to be a major issue with respect to a bottlenecking of the processing. And I would just like to ask both Immigration and Ministry of Education, what is the scope for the streamlining of the existing process for migrant children's school admissions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, my question is directly dealing with that, and I think Ms. Haynes as well. I've been waiting for Ms. Haynes to get a response.
Yes,
I really want to raise this issue on education and Ministry of National Security.
Right. Okay.
Also,
So if they can answer
one at a time. One at a time.
Yes, if they could then answer everybody together, because all of us asking the same question.
Because exactly. So we've managed for a few members and myself to ask.
Wait, no, but one interjection, because I've been really patient, because I think
as briefly as possible, Ms.
Yes, well, yes. If the question as to what has, in terms of policy, handed down to Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Education, etc., post the registration status, the registration process of 2019, what policy has been handed down in order to enact access to services by these in various ministries, then we would be able to get the answer. So the question is to Immigration, to the Ministry of National Security, coming out of 2019 and the registration status, what has been put in place, or what have they been mandated to put in place?
Noted, Member Haynes. So to wrap up questions that yourself, Member IE, Member Scotland have asked, which has not been addressed properly yet.
But I want to put it in a particular context. Why?
You go right ahead. I will allow you if you would like to put it through, but we are asking for the question to be answered from the three ministries, okay? Immigration,
National Security, and Education. Well, immigration is national security.
Sure. But the representatives are here separately, so please go ahead and ask for the three. Right. It's not a problem. Please proceed, Member I.
Yes. I want to ask the Ministry of National Security if they are aware that their regulations are unconstitutional. It flies in the face of our Constitution. Our Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago talks about the recognition and declaration of rights without discrimination. And it speaks about discrimination of race, color, religion, sex, and origin. It speaks about origin. What is origin? Where did you come from? What is your nationality? When we look at the immigration regulations, and it says, so we're talking about C6C, and it talks about persons seeking to enter and remain in Trinidad and Tobago who has been accepted, talking about students, as a student, adequate accommodation for the student at such establishment, no local student has been displaced, and the person seeking to enter and remain does not belong to a poverty class. But I mean, that's not so important in this context. When we look also, not only on our Constitution, which is, as far as I know, is the highest law of the land. So I don't see how immigration can go, on a different path. We have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child since 1991. And we therefore cannot deny children the right to education. It breaches 1, Article 2, non-discrimination, 3, best interests of the child, Article 6, the right to life, survival, and development, and Article 28, the right to education. I was conducting a workshop on child rights and principals were there. And they said to me, Ms. Ahi, if we do what you tell us to do, we will be in trouble with the Ministry of National Security and Immigration. Because I am saying that rule that you have there, 3, under C, no local student has been displaced, that is so wrong. Because when you have to discriminate, sometimes you have to decide between children. I am telling these principals, you have to decide between 2 children. If there are 2 Trinidadians, you have a way of doing it. And the way you normally do it is the age of the child. So you have 2 children to be admitted into the school. One is 6 and one is 5. Every principal will tell you, you will go for the older child because the child who is 5 years old, who is younger, will be, would have a longer chance, will have a greater, later on can have another chance. But the more urgent need is for the older child. So if you have 2 children, one is Venezuelan, one is Trinidadian, and that Venezuelan children is 6. The child is 6 years old. We must take that Venezuelan child, not the 5-year-old, because you cannot say no local student has been displaced because everyone is supposed to be equal, no discrimination because of their place of origin. We got to stop that. Ministry of National Security, we have to stop that nonsense. It's either we obey the convention or we don't. And right now, we are in breach of that. We are in breach of the Constitution. I want to hear from you. You think you could continue doing that? You think
Thank you, member. Thank you so much for your passionate contribution. And just to put everything back into perspective, based upon the last 3 members asking questions, both the national security and education, putting in a perspective of what is the scope for streamlining the existing process for migrant school admission, and also the constitutionality as it applies to the legal arrangements and the rights of the immigrants and child protection.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to respond. I would ask the Chief Immigration Officer if she could give us some insight on what's the usual process in terms of getting student permits and what we've achieved so far in terms of migrants.
Okay, good morning all. So far, from 2019 to presently March 2023, we have issued a number of student permits to migrants. Approximately 3,000 student permits have been issued to migrants. We acknowledge that during the migrant registration framework, there were approximately 2,500 students accompanying migrant children in need of education services. While the domestic legislative system is considering the options available to migrant children, those within this framework are being facilitated by national government organizations, the NGOs, and international agencies such as the Living Water Community, in IOM, the Laramie Migrant Support Group, the Arima La Casita Hispanic Cultural Center. These organizations are providing education to these students whilst we work on our policies and amending the legislature.
Can we hear the immigration's point of view based on the questions of the constitutionality issue raised by by member I, please?
In order, the applications for the student permits, of course, will come with the criteria to be satisfied, such as having a regular immigration status would be one of the most important criteria to be satisfied. And we acknowledge that the persons without any status will not, according to our Immigration Act, therefore will not satisfy the requirements and therefore will not be issued student permits. And again, it comes in simultaneously with the satisfying the criteria from Ministry of Education as well. So therefore, basically, criteria is not satisfied for these students with irregular immigration status.
Chairman, I will have to say at this point as well, we have not developed a policy to be approved to change what has been raised by member IE.
Noted. That comment will be noted. I would like to. Member John raised a particular topic here, and I would like to comb it through a little more thoroughly. And this is based upon, and this is for the Ministry of National Security and also probably immigration, specifically immigration. The Caribbean Center for Human Rights submission stated to ensure that immigrant detainees are protected according to international human rights standard. The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention in 2018 recommended that the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and other relevant organizations, including national human rights institutions, national preventative mechanisms, and international and national non-governmental organizations, must be allowed free access to the places of detention where those detained in the course of the migration proceedings are held. My question is as follows. Are representatives of local and international stakeholders working to secure migrants' rights, allowing free access to visit detained migrants at all detention locations? And if no, please provide the reasons for which some stakeholders are not granted access or why certain detention facilities are more or less accessible than others.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I will ask Ms. Ramcharita, who is our IPOID enforcement, to respond to this question.
Good morning, everyone. Members of the public or persons from non-government organizations or any other concerned bodies have access to detainees at both the Immigration Detention Center in Aripo and at the heliport immigration station at Chagaramas. We have a process that you request your visit and we put logistics in place for that visit to take place.
Ms. Pitcher, would you like to make a comment or have a question here at this point?
So I am not familiar with this process, but these are concerns that have been raised not just by CCHR, but other organizations that have not been granted access. And we have, on a number of occasions, sent letters to the Minister of National Security and Immigration Division requesting access to these facilities. We don't even get a confirmation of receipt of our request or email. And, you know, it's very, very concerning what's happening in immigration detention. It's been an ongoing issue. Generally, you know, the conditions in Aripo are extremely inhumane. There's actually a case of a Nigerian national that has been in Aripo for over 8 years. And reports that we've received are that he has serious health conditions. That's abominable. With regard to the heliport, of course, access would have been restricted simply because of COVID protocols. But now, I mean, that still does not absolve the states from granting access as being able to verify that, you know, treatment of migrants and asylum seekers and refugees adhere to international human rights standards. And it should disturb everyone here today and the entire of Trinidad and Tobago that we have women and minors, female minors, allegedly. There is reports that we receive, and it's ongoing. It's not individual complaints. It's ongoing reports of women and minors being sexually abused. There's currently an investigation of one young woman who has gone missing after she reported allegations of sexual abuse in the heliport. And we have, if there was a process in place we should have been notified of that process because we would have immediately taken action to access that process. So I'm unaware, and I'm sure there are other stakeholders who have also requested access that has not been notified of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitcher. Just to follow up on that, the Immigration Division, have you been in receipt of complaints of the conditions and also any acts of impropriety within the walls of the detention? And if so, what are the mechanisms out there for the reporting of such?
As most recent as 3 weeks ago, we had one incident of impropriety at the heliport immigration station. That matter has been referred to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and inquiries remain ongoing at this time.
Any other reports over the months, years, and any efforts being made to interject and to allow more freedom of information and communication from those within the walls of the detention center?
Persons in detention centers are visited daily by immigration officers, and once they express some sort of concern or some report of some sort of abuse, it is referred to the relevant authority, which was in the case of 3 weeks ago at the time of the escape or absconding of the lady in particular. And that matter has been referred to the TTPS and is ongoing at present.
Very well. I'm seeing Member Haynes' hand up. Is it pertaining to this particular topic? Okay, so before we go across there, I'm asking the question back to the Immigration Division. If that one case is the only case that you've had recently, what is the frequency of the cases, and how well do you have the ratification of the process and the solving of the process, and is anybody held accountable when the police has investigated as such?
Thus far, we have had this one report, Chairman, and we have referred it for the necessary inquiries.
I'm a little stumped to know it's one when we have so many issues being heard of and raised. I would like to ask the police service what mechanisms and what type of direct communication you have with the Immigrant Division for the purpose of receiving such reports or visiting the site, or to even if it means that you visit the locations for independent consultation with the immigrants. What does your role entail as it applies to investigating acts of impropriety as well as to maintaining law and order in these detention centers?
Okay, thank you for the question, Chair. The TTPS on a number of occasions find ourselves being a reactive entity, especially as it concerns these sort of reports, and that would be perhaps quite obvious that as we do not necessarily have any direct control, not that we wish to, over the detention centers, we can only respond when a report is made. We are aware of the one incident spoken of just now by Immigration Department, and the Carnage Police continuing inquiries into that report. We did get some useful information as it relates to the report, and the investigation is pending, as we have not as yet located the individual. On another occasion, we did get some information that caused us to venture to that port at Chagaramas. But even then, while we would have interviewed at least 30 persons detained there, we did not receive any information or evidence that would take us further into the information that we had initially received. Generally, we are open to reports, and when we get the reports, we attend to them, Chair.
Thank you. And staying with the TTPS, among measures that could help, according to your submission on page 15, you stated that among measures that could help to deter the sexual exploitation of migrants, the submission highlighted the provision of support and resources to migrant victims of sexual exploitation to access legal services, counseling, and safe housing. A possible award system via 800 tips for the reporting of sexual exploitation of migrant workers was also highlighted. I have to ask the question, what is the TTPS assessment of the adequacy of the provision of safe housing for migrant victims of sexual exploitation?
I will pass this question on, Chair, to the Superintendent in charge of Victims Unit.
Morning, Chair, and everyone. One of the is a lack of safe houses for migrants and in Trinidad and Tobago. When it comes to housing migrants of, let's say, sexual exploitation, the counter-trafficking normally takes the counter-trafficking unit normally takes the lead in that aspect. But we have safe places in Trinidad and Tobago, but it is not sufficient at all.
Thank you. Just your submission highlighted numerous barriers to the prosecution of perpetrators of sexual exploitation. There were challenges related to non-cooperation and or absconding of victims, intimidation of victims, and lengthy court proceedings. This is your submission, pages 5 to 6, number 12. I would like to ask, what are the possible measures to address these challenges you stated in your report?
Yes, Chair, I would pass that question on to our officers attached directly to the CTU.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. Thank you very much for that question. We have been having challenges with migrants. They are running from or absconding from the facilities. We have communicated through the CTU, Director CTU, and the agencies that provide accommodations, safe accommodations for the migrants, and as well as providing various counseling sessions and support for them while they are there waiting. The victims, they are not interested in waiting. We have had several meetings in trying to put things together to try to see how best we can work with them. We are still in that process of trying to work together with them to see what are the additional needs. Some of the safe houses, they are minimal, and some of the safe houses, they are not comfortable. We only get these safe houses as they are referred to from the IOM and from the Children's Authority. So what we have is what we work with. But again, we have made it quite clear through the Director CTU to those agencies to try to provide a more comfortable or better accommodations for them and to enhance some of the programs or additional situations they have so that they would be comfortable. Most of the migrants or the victims, though, they are not seeing that the prosecutions or the investigations should go on long or lengthy, but we go according to what they give us in the investigations. So we go to their timing. So if it takes a lengthy time giving statements, doing journeys and stuff, it would stretch the investigation to a lengthy on our end. However, they are not interested. They are not comfortable. They don't see it. They expect that the investigation is going to start today and finish in 2-3 days or finish within 2-3 weeks.
And that is one of the challenges that we have. And again, we try to explain to them as much as possible that that is not how it is done, and we try to work along with them.
Thank you for your response. I also read that regarding the strengthening of cooperation between the Special Victims Department, and the Living Waters community, the submission stated that there has been positive feedback. I'm trying to at least wrap up here on a positive note with respect to the TTPS and making some progress, because they must have some light here. The submission says that there have been positive feedback on the development of the referral pathways for the migrants. Has any specific qualitative data been collected about the impact of this cooperation from the migrants' perspective? And whilst I asked that question, although you did say that the TTPS is on a react, and they basically respond to incidents, so it's reactionary in nature. When you go there and you have to interview and so on, do you sense that there is a freedom of speech? The immigrants are allowed to interact. Do they complain to you about lack of support or access from the wider community being able to intervene on matters? Are they isolated? What sense do you get from the victims or from the immigrants whilst being inside and interacting?
Yes, Chair, and just to clear that reactionary statement, it is only as it relates to persons who are detained in the detention centers. Generally, our policing, because it is intelligence-led, it's quite proactive. So I was only referring to the persons in detention. However, for the rest of that question, though, in terms of what sort of qualitative data may be obtained, I would hand over that question to the superintendent in charge of our Special Victims Department, who was there, that department tend to interact specifically with these sort of issues.
Thank you. What we see happening within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is, with the advent of the formation of the Gender-Based Violence Unit in 2020, a lot of stakeholders engage the TTPS, and the TTPS also engage the stakeholders, including government ministries, NGOs, and other persons in the community. And when it comes to migrants, we had meetings with the Living Waters community, and we were able to partnership with the Living Waters community and be able to hold like outreach programs to sensitize the migrant population about, gender-based violence, child protection issues, how they can seek out assistance in Trinidad and Tobago if they are victims or if they are vulnerable to crime or any situation, including sexual exploitation in Trinidad and Tobago. When it comes to the qualitative data, I do not have that with me today, but we do keep a record of, the migrants that we interact with and the outreach programs that we do conduct. So there is some sort of, a really beautiful relationship, because attacking these crimes within the organization or even in Trinidad and Tobago, it takes a multi-sectoral approach. The police, we cannot do it alone. We need buy-in by other ministries, by other agencies, and also by the NGOs as well. Thank you.
Chair, and perhaps Sergeant Mills of the city, you can even add some information that would help this particular inquiry.
We also engage migrants through a screening process, and we also keep data relative to these migrants. So when they come in, whether they are victims, we deal with them. And if they are not victims, we hand them over to the relevant authorities. However, we keep a data as to our interactions with them. I don't have the data as well here with me today, but we do keep record of the interactions of these migrants.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Before I move on to Member Haynes, I just wanted to tie this over into a question to national security. Your submission detailed that the counter-trafficking units received a total of 194 reports related to sexual exploitation of migrants over the period January 2019 to March 2023. However, 65 victims did not cooperate with the investigations. This just leads from what the TTPS has been saying, and it supports what they're saying as well. Does the ministry have any information as to whether these refusals to cooperate by alleged victims may have been motivated by fear or by intimidation?
Yeah, Deputy Director CG, you will handle this one.
Thank you. So of the 65 victims who would have refused to cooperate, some it would have been because of fear from their traffickers, because when they would have been in captivity with their traffickers would have told them, you know, if you tell the police about us, we would harm you, we would harm your relatives back in Venezuela. However, the majority of victims, it is not a matter of fear, but rather the trauma they would have undergone. And remember, they're in a strange country, they don't speak the language. So, you know, they are more or less out of their comfort zone and they just want to return home as soon as possible. And our law, the Trafficking in Prisons Act, provides for us to ensure that they are repatriated safely to their home country. So many times we would engage with victims, they would start telling us their story and then they would say, but I don't really want this to go before the court, I just want to go home. Many of these victims have children as well in Venezuela and they want to be reunited with them as soon as possible. So it's a combination of factors, but I wouldn't say solely unfair or highly unfair. It's usually because of the trauma they would have experienced.
Noted, but I mean, we must take into consideration if it is that all the proper international agencies and the protecting bodies had full access to the victims, if they're not victims or they're just immigrants, I mean, and create an environment whereby there can be a free exchange to assist them in their plight. Remember, this is not necessarily a forced choice. People are crossing borders in the hope of a better life. And if it is that we have, according to how it's supposed to operate, the Red Cross, the counseling bodies, the international organizations having free access, and we create an environment whereby, you know, the immigrants feel more comfortable, maybe we can increase the success of these errand cases that tend to happen regardless. Member Haynes, I would like to come across to you now and then go to Member I.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to just take this opportunity to bring into the conversation the members from the Living Waters, as well as Ms. Pitcher, because I found throughout our deliberations, we're hearing from the ministries, state agencies, etc. And that is one perspective they would be able to see it from one space, that is the space of the state and the role the state has in responding to a situation. But I believe the Living Water community, as well as Ms. Pitcher, would be able to give us another view as to the realities of the situation that's being faced and what the persons coming to them at their agencies have to say and what their experience has been, because I think that would be truly informative to see if we're really finding solutions to a problem or we're engaging in an exercise in public relations.
Thank you. I will ask Svetlana to respond specifically to the matter that has been discussed now, and I will speak a bit to education when we're ready to revert to that particular topic. Svetlana?
Hi, just to clarify something, you're asking me what is the experience when we or migrants came to us, right?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah. So migrants came to us for referral for different reasons. They can come walking, they can come refer from another organization, they can call, etc. Right? We do an assessment, but I think answer the question. Migrants are afraid to any police, CTU. We are afraid about it, right? Why? Because I think most to see the incident of the person, I mean the SUV incident, right? They study more maybe the legal status of the person. So people who's coming illegal, they will say, yes, I'm coming to report, and I'm gonna be maybe in the jail because I am illegal, even when it's SUV, even human trafficking matter. I am one of the person, because I am a protection advocate for SUV, who report to the legal department and living water community, and they report to CTU. And when I take cases, right, and do you see how these persons talk about it, right? When I told them, can I refer to you to a legal department so you can get counseling about what you should do, right? Because I think if they report everything, if we report every single case, we might have a better outcomes, and or maybe try to stop a little the trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago. But as some of them say that they don't want because they're afraid, you're right. They have still families in Venezuela, and people know where the family live. Even here, they are persecuted by others. Girls are selling for 20,000, and they so it's not a really honestly a protection that we can offer to them, because yes, we have a lack of safe housing. It's a lot of migrants, and we have a lack in some things. I answer your question. If I not, please let me know.
You have actually indeed answered my question with a perspective that has not been introduced to the committee yet.
Member Haynes, I would also like, if it's okay at this point, just to make a couple of comments with regard to education.
If it's based upon the questions that were unanswered in the past, a little while ago, please proceed.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that it was said earlier that, agencies like ourselves, we are able to offer educational services to the children while the government works out the legislative barriers and so on. But I just want to mention that we have been able to have quite a significant impact, I think, with education for the migrant and refugee children, with over 1,400 children at present on our enrollment list. But this parallel support is just simply not sustainable. We have seen since 2020 that the donors that support these efforts, not only with Living Water Community, but other child-friendly spaces that have emerged in different communities across the country, the donors that are supporting these efforts, the funds available are dwindling rapidly. And since 2020, we have seen that year on year that the funds that have been allocated to education of migrants and refugees is being reduced. And it's simply not going to be sustainable for us to continue with that level of support. And I want to just flag that 3 years, I mean, if you want to just look back to 2019, Venezuelans have been coming here, I mean, from ever, for a very long time. But if you want to just go back to the registration that took place in 2019, you're talking about 3 years of learning loss for children. And that is a significant amount of time in a child's life. And we simply can't allow this to just, I think some sort of focus and more attention or more urgency, I think, needs to be placed on the effort to get the children into the schools. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pitcher, I believe you had a comment to make after member Member Ains' question.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to echo what my colleague Svetlana said about that element of fair in reporting. We need to be cognizant of the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is a very small society and everyone knows each other. And of course, it's been in the public domain with the State Department's report on trafficking that state officials are involved in trafficking networks. And again, as you've seen in our submission where, the allegations of persons that are running the facility at the heliport are perpetrators of abuse, of alleged abuse. And those are reports that we have received of this hesitation to report simply because members of state agencies are involved and the networks are very, very interrelated, integrated. And because we're in a small society, it's easy for that information to travel. For example, I'll give you one example with the PCA, where a victim, she reported, and then she withdrew her complaint simply because once the PCA receives a complaint, they have to notify the police officer who the complaint is made against. And that in and of itself, there's no protection. Not only that, language barriers, the tremendous xenophobia. We've also received reports where victims will go to the police stations and, they attempt to make reports, and the attitude, by some members of the police service, they ignore them sometimes, or the comments. These are particularly vulnerable people. Language barrier is a tremendous barrier in access to justice. And then, of course, the xenophobia is also another barrier, that fear, that vulnerability. They're not regularized. They don't have documentation. They're irregular. So fair to report simply because of those factors, and those are things that we need to keep in mind. Yes, trauma may play a part because of all the delays in the justice system, and they may just abandon their complaints simply because things take so long in this country with regards to the justice system. But fair is very much a very relevant factor in being able to follow up on these cases. And until we're not going to be able to get justice in these in trafficking cases, if we don't create that enabling environment, because if you don't have anybody that's reporting, who are you going to prosecute? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitcher. I'd just like to move on to Member Thompson. You're muted, member. You're muted.
Living Waters. Now, Living Waters receive funding from, as far as I know, UNHCR, UNICEF. I see that they collaborate with the Catholic Education Board of Management. And my question is, one, do you collaborate also with the Ministry of Education? I am also aware that you offer legal assistance. Is there any collaboration or any possibility of a working relationship with the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority so that they might be able to assist in that regard, and the money that you would use in funding your lawyers would in fact go to education or some other need? Now, when we talk about education, we're talking about economic, social, and cultural rights, which are second-generation rights. And to be fair, when we say that we have these obligations under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, they must be undertaken in the framework to the maximum extent of our available resources and within the framework of international cooperation. When we report to the Child Rights Committee, there is also a window of opportunity under Article 45 for us to seek international assistance to implement this right of the child, the right to education. And I want to know from, if in fact this pressing need for education has been communicated so it can be put into our report, which I know is long, long overdue. We're supposed to report every 5 years. The last report I know probably was about what, 2003. Glenda Morin was at the time Attorney General, so that's moons ago. So I don't know where we are. I know that we are very delinquent. It's not every 5 years. The last final thing I saw from the committee, the recommendation was 2006. So we need to work on that. But there are areas of opportunity. And for those members of the public who are wondering if foreigners ever displace children, you know, who are in our jurisdiction, who are our children, it happens all the time. You think if somebody, an expat comes here with 4 children, and once they get into a prestige primary school, that person will not be allowed. If you're a diplomat or some other person and you don't want to send your child, pay for your child in school. So it happens. I am saying we need to look much more closely to what's helping those children who are more disadvantaged in the society. The inequality in the society is very real. So we must stop burying our heads in the sand, all right? And we have all kinds of ways that people use. I've been in education, I was in education before law. And I know at the highest level, and I'm not talking firsthand, I personally know, people seek intervention to get their children into prestige primary schools, non-paying schools. I can call the names of some, you know, the schools in Port of Spain. Foreigners get in there quite easily. So don't think it's some pie in the sky thing that I'm advocating. I am just saying, try to strive for equality because education is so important. The ramifications of not doing what we ought to do in terms of education, you know, it's very important in what happens with children to bring them out of poverty, to participate fully in their communities, to empower them to be the best that they can be in terms of their future. So let's see what we can do, please. So living waters.
Thank you, Member. Well, with regard to the Ministry of Education and how we collaborate with that ministry, we have a mechanism which we call the Education Working Group, which basically we have representation on that group from all the donors, all of, well, of course, Living Water community, and we have a dedicated representative who attends all our meetings and works with us on advocacy and everything that we are doing as an education working group to promote and to seek solutions for the migrant and refugee children with regard to education. She is present and providing us with information, up-to-date information and up-to-date opportunities where perhaps we can work together. At present, the working group is trying to develop a phased approach to integration of the children into the schools so that we can present that to the appropriate ministries as a solution, because Living Water community has a number of trained facilitators or teachers who have been working with these migrant and refugee children for years and have received training in how to deal with English as a second language, how to deal with content, language, and integrated learning, how to deal with protection and trauma that these children may have faced or experienced, psychosocial, psychological first aid and stuff like that. And so we have a cadre of teachers who can potentially be an excellent resource in supporting other schools as they take, hopefully eventually take children in. So the short answer to your question is yes, we do work very closely with the Ministry of Education, and we have a dedicated representative who works with us. The second question that you raised was with regard to legal services, and we don't actually allot a significant portion of our budget to legal services. We do have an attorney and support staff who work on immigration matters, but we work very closely with legal aid, where we have 20 attorneys who offer their services free of charge. But they don't typically deal with immigration matters. They deal with other issues that migrants may come to us with. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, both for the questions and the answer. We still have a pending unanswered question, and we got a response from the Ministry of Education. However, it was being alluded that part of the issues was with immigration for the processing for the applications for the education of migrants. So directly to the Immigration Division, what is the key mechanisms dealing with the bottleneck with the requests of migrant children to basically be processed to receive education?
As far as I'm aware, there is no bottleneck of applications for processing student permit applications. That is, any outstanding applications, I do not have that information with me at hand. I can submit that to you in writing at a later time. The staff we have in that section, we have adequate staff, and I know that I follow up almost on a daily basis with this section. There is no backlog as far as I'm aware.
Okay, so you rest comfortable. I'm seeing a disagreeing head in Ms. Mungru on camera here, because we're hearing two different sides of the equation here, which not adding up. We're hearing that there's a bottleneck of process, and then we heard that it is a processing of on the immigration aspect. I believe the Archbishop spoke about this. He even said, you know, they have done everything they can do to get to prepare for the children. However, as it applies, they have bottlenecks existing. The Ministry of Education went to tongue on the processes available. But you are saying straightforward that there is no bottlenecking. You have adequate staff.
So I'm confident there is no backlog on our end.
Chairman, if I may assist in the clarification here. I think the question that we have to ask is, what is holding up the approval process that would allow the Catholic Board to include migrant children into their school system? And that is where the stagnation is occurring with respect to what I believe Ms. Monger and Lee were looking at. And so that is a very specific question, as opposed to, because we can get caught up in who can access the student permits, which I'm sure a lot of persons can, but also a lot of persons are unable to. I understand there's a constraint with respect to what immigration needs to do. So immigration, it would be correct in saying there's no backlog on the basis of the current system. So the question is, what is being done to up the system to facilitate what needs to be done to correct the problem that Trinidad and Tobago is facing in 2023? So I think that would clear up the questioning, which is...
Yes, thanks for your guidance, Member Haynes. Please, if there can be an answer from immigration on this matter as it pertains to that point, to wrap up what the Archbishop has stated and has been summarized by Member Haynes.
Chairman, I would take this one in that it would again reflect on what I would have said earlier. It would take some policy change and legislative change, and we have not pushed that forward quickly enough at this stage, because the migrant children would not really qualify under the stipulations we have for student permits. One of them would be how they came legally here, stamps on their passports, those documentation. So it's something we would have to look at to push forward in terms of policy.
Thank you very much for the answer. But is there an existing draft policy at this time, or is anything being developed?
Chair, I cannot say yes that there is a draft policy at this time.
If I may,
Member John, so Member John had her hand up.
Just responding to
Member
her.
John, please
Okay.
proceed.
Yes, so, yes, Chairman, thank you. Yes, just to sort of follow up with that question. Can the ministry tell us how many, if they have a sense of how many students will be here? I mean, many of them or some of them are most likely undocumented, but the folks who would have been registered in 2019, do they have a sense of how many of the students are out of school at this time? In addition, I read on the, I don't know if it's the Archdiocese submission, but there was a number of requests, 432, I think it's students, denied 285, because the Archbishop is saying they have space for everybody. But what is the basis on which they have been denied? Is it the legal requirement? And approved of 58, but that's still 285 and 58 still doesn't add up to 432. So I'm not sure what is happening here. You know, because we have been told there's enough space for everybody, and yet we are seeing the majority have been denied entry into school, that is.
We would not have received applications from all of the children, the irregular migrants. Coming out of the framework, the migrant registration framework, approximately, as I would have mentioned before, approximately 2,500 students accompanying the parents are in need of educational services. However, again, because of the lack of documentation, regular status, these applications would not have been, well, we did not receive as much applications, but if we did receive any, they would not have been processed because of this criteria not being satisfied.
May I assist here, Mr. Chairman?
Before that, I just have to go to someone who has a raised hand in queue. And Ms. Mungru, you wanted to comment on this topic?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in April in 2020, we actually submitted an application to the Ministry of National Security for student permits for 150 migrant children of Venezuelan descent. And these applications were submitted after having worked with Living Water so that the children would be prepared for entry into school. That means that they spoke sufficient English. They were tested by our principals in interviews to ensure that they did speak sufficient English. Our principals had assured us that there were spaces in the school so that no local child would be displaced. We submitted those applications for 150 migrant children. We never got a response. The Archbishop wrote subsequently, so we submitted those in April. In September, he wrote to ask what is happening. We haven't got a response, but to date, we've had no response. And so this is why the figures do not add up. You have 150 that have not been denied, but have not been approved. These people have applied, they've requested entry into the schools, but we've had no response whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mangru. Can I ask Immigration Division to respond to this, please? Because it's technical terms right now. It's either denial or backlog. So let's deal with the 150 something or denied applications, please. Request.
These applications were not processed, but I do not have that information with me at hand. I would certainly, when I get back to office, I would look into that matter and ascertain how many applications are there, how many applications would have been received, and I will provide that information in writing to the committee.
Okay, we would make a note of that. However, can you please, when you answering this question and submitting it, can you please give it full explanation as to why they either were not processed or if it was that it was a matter of being denied?
Yes.
Because 2 years ago and counting, because I mean we're seeing here recommendations being followed on one side, but if it is that who has to feed the process is not processing the children moving forward, we're gonna have a fallout, and the system basically can have a level of not being cyclical the way it's supposed to operate.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Top member, are you would you like to come in at this stage?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. We ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child since 1991. Under Article 42, state parties undertake to make the principles and provisions of the convention widely known by appropriate and active means to adults and children alike. It is so painful to sit here, sit in Parliament and all around, and people still don't know the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Article 2, which is the second one, says state parties shall respect and ensure the rights set forth in the present convention to each child within their jurisdiction, without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents or legal guardians' race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin, property, disability, birth, or other status. We have responsibility to documented and undocumented migrants. If you all hear one lesson today, please understand that. We should not be talking about if today, 32 years after, we still don't know. Once the children here, we have that responsibility to give them all their rights. We cannot consider whether they're documented or not. We just cannot. When are we going to stop this, you know? We have little snippets of educational material on television. I had to call sometime to tell them you're talking nonsense, you know, and they took off the ad. Why can't we get it right? We have a children's authority that we're spending millions of dollars on. And I can tell you, many of them don't even know the convention. Let's get on with it, please. So we won't be having this whether or not. Did they hear? We have to take care of each and every child. Please understand that. Viewing audience, members of the committee, everybody understand that. Understand that. They're here, we have to take care of them. We have to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I'm really, really vexed about this because I have been preaching child rights for years, you know? And I'm always amazed that you meet people, they don't know anything about it. And we're supposed to act in accordance with it? Where are we going? The last time the United Nations told us, every parliamentarian must be educated. Some of the questions that come to Parliament shouldn't come there because we're supposed to know those things, that we cannot do certain laws and so on that are not in keeping with the convention.
Noted.
We have a whole handbook on parliamentarians and convention on the rights of each other. They give all the material. Let's read now.
Thank you, member. I would like to ask a question to the Immigration Division, particularly upon getting it right from what has been submitted. Based on the submission of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, it expresses a view that detention of migrants at the heliport does not meet the principles of necessity and proportionality. The reasons for this assertion is that all deprivations of liberty must have a legitimate aim, be appropriate to the aim pursued, and have a fair balance struck between the conflicting interests, according to the Inter-American Court and Working Group on arbitrary detention. What is the ministry's perspective on the proportionality of the existing practices regarding the detention of would-be asylum seekers, including at the heliport?
Mr. Chairman, the person detained at the heliport immigration station are being kept there temporarily in order to facilitate repatriations that are held in collaboration with the Venezuelan embassy and the TTCG for their repatriation back home. These are persons who would have breached the Immigration Act, basically illegal entry. More severe offenses, those persons are kept at the Immigration Detention Center in Aripo. So the persons who are kept at the heliport are really that transition phase where we determine how we are treating with them, and then for their subsequent repatriation to their home country, Venezuela. In terms of the asylum seekers and possible refugees, the act does not encompass them whilst they are being dealt with by the UNHCR. So according to the Immigration Act, if you are ordered deported, we have to execute the deportation order as soon as practicable.
Okay, so thanks for that answer. It just leads me into a couple more with respect to the differentiation of the management and handling and classification of detainees or migrants from between the IDC and ARIPO. In the same submission, it further raises that given the facility operates, this applies to the heliport. Given that the facility operates as an immigration detention facility, additional concerns arise about whether this facility operates under the same policies and procedures as those of the Immigration Detention Center in ARIPO. The submission also highlights that the heliport facility is run by Coast Guard staff as opposed to immigrant divisional personnel. A few questions, and can I ask if does the detention facility in the heliport operate under the same policies and procedures as the IDC in ARIPO?
The heliport is not a detention facility, but an immigration station where we detain persons physically for that transition onto how we treat with them. In terms of the Venezuelan migrant population, we try to move with them quickly in collaboration with the Venezuelan embassy. And once we have finished treating with that aspect of it, we try to have them repatriated as soon as practicable after to Venezuela. It is not in keeping with the same processes of the Immigration Detention Center, where we have more or less detained persons for more criminal offenses there. So persons who would have engaged the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service at some point in time, charges and offenses, they would have served time in prison and have now been released. We would choose to put them into the Immigration Detention Center at ARIPO, which has a more detention facility than the heliport immigration station.
Okay, staying on this question, our Coast Guard staff, are they appropriately equipped to work with detained migrants as immigration divisional personnel?
In terms of the manning of the facilities, the manning of the Immigration Detention Center is done by detention officers, and the heliport is manned by TTCG, mostly so because it's on a Defense Force facility. Hence the reason it's manned by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. However, the immigration officers are involved and visit daily the facility to ensure that the persons who are detained there are being properly treated and that they have no issues arising out of the detention there.
Okay, so you're okay with the staff visiting. What you're saying here is that although because of it being a Coast Guard site, you're saying that you agree that it is manned by them, but they may not be an appropriate supervisor of the migrants, but you're saying based upon the visitation by the other departments that acts as a check and balance between making sure fair treatment is received.
Yes, sir.
At this point in time, I'd like to ask if anyone would like to have any other questions, any members, any unanswered questions that were raised today. Okay, so at this point in time,
Mr.
I would
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I have one thing I would really
sure.
That's burning me that I really would welcome the opportunity to speak.
Please proceed.
Counter trafficking unit. I don't know if people look at television as I do, but there's a very offensive to me and should be offensive to everybody. That advertisement that they want to do something which it is not working, where the young men are speaking about how to get the girls, you have to isolate them. You have to give them this, you have to give them that. It's sending the wrong message because it's actually saying what to do. Please try and put it in a more positive way so that you do not encourage the people who are not yet into getting these girls into this servitude, that they will do the right thing. Don't tell them what to do. Tell the girls how to protect themselves in a positive way. That message is the wrong message. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
you have to isolate them, and some of them like this, and you have to give them this. Why are you doing it that way? It makes absolutely no sense. And I'm so glad for the opportunity to say that, because it's something, every time I see that ad, it just burns my soul. Who can conceive of something like that? It's stupid. That's the only description. Don't do it that way. Fix it. Because there are many people out there who are now thinking of doing the crime. You're telling them what to do? No, sir. That's not right.
Member, point taken fully, and I would ask the counter-trafficking representative from the Ministry of National Security to make a comment based upon the burning issue with Member I.
Member, his comment is noted. We will revisit it, but I have to say though that we have used that advertisement in schools, and it has actually brought a lot of conversation from the students as in what not to do. So I could see your point where you're saying it is showing the traffickers or potential traffickers what to do. But on the flip side, it is also interpreted by the younger persons as, okay, if somebody is trying to isolate me or give me gifts, why? Nothing is free. So it makes them think, because I do a lot of school sensitizations and we show ads like that, and it brings a lot of good conversation among the younger persons. But your comment is definitely noted, and we'll review it with our stakeholders and the communications department. So thanks.
I am so heartened by your response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we go to closing remarks, I would ask Ms. John, Member John, to make a contribution. She has a hand up.
Chairman, thank you. No, I just wanted to press again with this 150 students. Well, I mean, who have been approved, perhaps, quote unquote, and yet not having the space when the space is available for these students. And of course, the 285 that have been denied, even if they are here, you know, given the consequences, I think we have to press a little harder to ensure that these children can get into school, notwithstanding, you know, yes, the rules are there, or basically we have some convention. It ain't working. If it's not working, it's not working. That's one. And two, I think there's a casualness. I don't know if after we have finished here, if we would have, what we are saying will weigh heavily on the minds of those responsible for the situation at the heliport, you know, where if it is these migrants are in transition. Sorry. Chairman?
Please proceed.
Yes, I'm saying the migrants who are in transition, I think they would have come here illegally, I'm hearing, and they're in transition. They're making arrangements for them to return. It would be interesting to know how long they have to wait, this wait, for them to return, because I think notwithstanding they broke the law to come in, it doesn't mean that we have a right to strip them of their dignity and you know, put them into so much trauma to return them. I'm not advocating for breaking of our laws, obviously, but certainly we can treat people more decently. We can't have young children being sexually abused under our care, because we still have care and jurisdiction over these lives. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Ms. John. Member John, can we get your contribution from Member Haynes, please?
Thank you, Chairman, for recognizing me. I know you're about to invite closing remarks, and I may need to jump off to head to the sitting of the House of Representatives today at 1:30. So I just wanted to again thank everyone for their contributions today, but I wanted to say that I can acknowledge as a person who understands how the system works, the difficulties people, the officials from the Ministry of National Security, Education, the situation that you found yourself in, where you were asked to answer questions on policy when you are the agency's here that execute policy. So you don't create the policy, you execute the policy that comes your way. And I'm sure that once the policy comes your way, you will execute it with diligence and alacrity, and we can look forward to that. But so my concluding statements would be to the powers that be, get the policy in place so that the persons charged with the responsibility of enacting those policies are not put in a position to answer questions that they simply will not be in a position to. So thank you again for trying as best as you can. You have still represented your agencies well, but I understand the difficulties that you would have faced today.
Thank you, Member Haynes. At this point in time, I would like to welcome brief closing comments, and we will go in the order in which we introduce ourselves. I would like to call on the Permanent Secretary, Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security.
Chairman, thank you. Members, thank you. Our M&S team has certainly taken copious notes on the points raised today. There was no way we could have missed the passion that was exuded by members. We have the sense of urgency now, and yes, although we may not be the person to decide on policy, I am certainly committed to having the conversation going and raising it with all the stakeholders and the necessary parties to hear. So that's the commitment you will get through national security today.
Many thanks, Ms. Nataki Atiba-Dilchan. I now call on Ms. Natalie Willis, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labour.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to be part of this discussion this morning. The Ministry of Labour continues to be committed to ensuring that the rights of all employees, regardless of whether documented or undocumented, where they are migrants, we continue to ensure that all rights are protected. So we will continue to work with all our stakeholders to ensure that this is done. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ms. Willis. I now call on the Chief Education Officer, Acting Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, Ms. Anna Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Within the legal constraints, and as we continue to be guided by national security, the Ministry of Education continues its active collaborations to provide support to the entities who do provide educational services to those migrants, to children who are currently not served by the existing system. We would have elaborated on those collaborations in our submission, page 8. The ministry is proactive in providing and enabling, in its efforts to provide an enabling environment to support migrants, and in this case, particularly Venezuelans. And to that end, we have implemented as a core to our national curriculum Spanish. So it's to be taught at both primary and secondary as a core, not an option. And also pursued the implementation of strategies to further the cause of Spanish as the first foreign language. And we have some initiatives that we have completed with the CAF, the Latin American Bank, and in going forward to that end. So I wanted to leave with you the commitment that we are in the meanwhile doing our very best to make sure that we do provide to equity in the system. We are not ignorant, and we are very mindful of the plight before us, and are actively pursuing efforts within our remit and as far as possible to make sure that our students, these migrant students, children who are within our national boundaries are served. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ms. Singh. I would now like to call upon the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Intelligence and Investigations of the TTPS, Mr. Kurt Simon.
Thank you again, Chair. The Trinidad Police Service, we have heard the expressions, the concerns, the experiences about the different and the varying departments here on this forum today. The TTPS remain resolved in
Many thanks, sir. I would like to call on Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon to make his closing comments.
The rights of a child, as we've heard stressed over and over, is a significant thing for a country to ensure that we safeguard. We have hundreds of children whose rights are being denied right now in our country, have been denied for the last 4 years since the Prime Minister has said that these children should be educated. And I don't think that any of us should go away without contemplating the two major issues that we've heard today. The first is that we have children in our nation that are not being educated because of bureaucracy. And second, there are people who are vulnerable, who are being exploited sexually and in other ways through us and through the operations of that are supposed to be protecting them. I would really ask those who are taking part in this conversation to think about this very deeply and ask what kind of society are we? And to ask, how do we get the fastest solution to these two challenges that we're facing? Thank you.
Many thanks, Archbishop. I would like to call on a representative from the Living Waters community, Ms. Simone Aguilera here, to make her closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say that I personally feel quite hopeful after witnessing the passion of committee members. I trust that this meeting will have the desired impact that we are all hoping for, and that we will gain traction on these migrant and refugee matters such as education for children, enhanced access to their rights, and integration. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank state actors who have and continue to collaborate with us in a very meaningful way. And we remain committed to this effort and will make ourselves available for any follow-up activities. So thank you.
I'd like to move on to Ms. Pitcher, Caribbean Center for Human Rights representative. For your closing remarks, Ms. Pitcher, I think you need to...
Sorry, my internet just dropped there momentarily. I just want to quickly respond to the comments made by the Immigration Division, Ministry of National Security, with regards to the operations of the heliport. Under our Constitution, everyone on our soil are entitled to equality of treatment. So it's striking that there's an admission that there is a difference in treatment at the heliport as opposed to Immigration Division, as opposed to the detention facility in a repo. And with that comes that differentiation in treatment as well, too, comes the fact that we have, officials, different officials, trained in different capacities, and migrants and asylum seekers need particular care, and only competent, skilled staff that are able to do that. And yes, it may have been a station for to process persons that are being sent back. However, many of the persons that are in that facility are there for months, even over a year. So that detention of them, it becomes arbitrary just because of the nature of the length of detention. In terms of our recommendations and our closing remarks, we urge all committee members, I'm encouraged by the commitment and the passion of all members to enhance the rights of migrants and refugees, but I urge that attention be directed towards this heliport facility and immigration detention in particular, because there are too many reports of violations of human rights. And these are, persons that are particularly vulnerable. And these reports of sexual abuse, it's extremely disturbing. And we also urge the committee to engage in actions to facilitate independent monitoring of these facilities so we can have some accountability and transparency in terms of operations of the policies and procedures. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Many thanks to all. I would like to thank all officials for your contributions and your deliberations in today's proceedings. I would like to thank the committee members who participated remotely for this virtual hearing. Many thanks to the staff of the Office of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support, and most definitely from the viewing public and the listening audience. Thank you all once again, and I would now declare that this meeting be adjourned.
Thank you, Chair, for a wonderful job. Go back to the...
Many thanks for the passion and the